Hello, Northstar here with another Singularity video. So, it's a quicker game. It's not the most involved thing. Some people nonetheless like watching this. Uh, just doing, get these missions. I guess I never really explained this to people. Um, there's stars, constellations, dark matter, and sometimes specific missions that reduce the cost of a given generator. Here, like the simulated collisions for the Andromeda Galaxy, referring to the, excuse me, in that case of the Andromeda and Milky Way galaxies are eventually going to merge into one simulation of what that collision will look like. Um, Hint for those who never heard of it, it's stars aren't generally going to touch each other. It's not going to be crazy for like life on Earth if it's still chugging along at that point, which won't the sun have already eaten the Earth by then, or whatever other planets have life at that point. Um, but the sky will certainly look different. And if there's, say, sentient life in the Andromeda Galaxy that's become spacefaring, let's say we're the only in the Milky Way, but the Andromeda also evolved a sentient spacefaring species, then that could certainly lead to big changes in our situation, our perceived situation in the universe. Of course, that'll happen in a billion years, so humanity will have to have left Earth by then, pretty much, and traveled across the galaxy, other star systems, the Milky Way. Otherwise, no way we'll survive that long. Millions, maybe tens or even 100 million years humanity might last on Earth, but a billion, not a chance. Not without becoming a spacefaring species, a truly interstellar one, not just within the solar system. It's just interesting. Note many people don't know the difference between interplanetary, interstellar, and intergalactic. Here, people refer to interstellar as being just between planets in our solar system. No, that's interplanetary. Or you'll hear people stupidly call something intergalactic that's just between stars in the Milky Way. No, that's interstellar. Inter means between two different things at a similar level. Intra would mean like intragalactic would mean within one galaxy. Intergalactic means between two different galaxies. Just like interpersonal skills are skills between two people, intrapersonal skills are skills of things like self-reflection and understanding yourself and self-control. Anyways, let's see. Long COVID chugs on. I deal with some people who are probably fake users on dating apps who have not heard of that. Well, I suspicion the person who said that was actually a fake user from India, where the government is suppressing news coverage of long COVID even more, and the U.S. government is kind of pressuring media not to talk about it too much. But that's nothing compared to like what Modi's government is doing to erase the disease in his country. These people pretend to be in America and they make up fake personas, but they're scammers. And of course, they've never heard things like long COVID because a lot of the global south, it's just never talked about. There's a lot of people suffering from long COVID in the global south, just to be clear, in the third world. And there's very little in the way of government support for them, but no one ever talks about it. The media doesn't report on it. So they're erased even worse than in the U.S., which is not making excuses for the United States erasing the disease. Watch some unbearably dumbass, not dumbass, but unbearably irritating, excuse me, leftist YouTube videos where, I am a socialist myself, but that doesn't mean that some socialists aren't idiots or don't say truly stupid things even if they're otherwise smart people at times. And hearing this spate of videos which are just getting pushed by the YouTube algorithm now, probably because maybe YouTube wants to see this narrative peak for a reason, whether to get engagement or because the owners have decided they want people to think this. There's been this spate of videos anyways talking about how population isn't really the problem on Earth, and we need to allow more immigration because otherwise the population in developed areas will decline. In a video, someone talked about Europe's population declined from 400 something million to 295 if they shut their borders to immigration. And it was just such a face palm. The justification's always the pension systems will collapse without young people. Yes, if the pension systems continue to be run like giant Ponzi schemes that transfer money from the young to the poor in ways that are unsustainable, if there aren't far more young people than old people. Sorry, did I say young to poor, young to the old? The old often become poor under capitalism. Then yeah, but you could just, countries can and should just fund pensions out of normal tax revenues. Payroll taxes are actually regressive. That is, they affect the poor proportionally more than the rich. And probably one of the worst ways to fund something, a pension scheme, especially because it causes problems with an aging population. So change the way pension welfare for the elderly and that kind of stuff is funded. Don't say, oh, we must grow the population because we can't change the way that we do accounting. And you hear stuff about, well, the real problem is production of coal, oil, natural gas. That's true. The amount we produce of fossil fuels determines how much CO2 is produced, plain and simple. And whether the population grows or shrinks, existing production is mostly just going to keep up and going to kill the planet. But if the population grows, labor becomes cheaper relative to the supply of capital. What is the amount of capital, say, is fixed at a given point in time. It grows over time. I guess I shouldn't say it's fixed. That implies it doesn't change. It's at a certain number. It's discernible, measurable amount of capital that's floating around at this point in time, and a little more at this. As people build new factories, roads, bridges, whatever. Infrastructure isn't often always considered capital, but infrastructure capital, as countries develop, even rich countries are still developing. Even developed countries, they still add more factories over time. They increase the number of robots in factories. A factory that has a ton of automation is worth more capital than one that has very little automation that requires more labor to operate to produce the same goods, for instance. So capital grows over time. That's just a law of capitalism. And the ratio between the number of people who are available in the workforce and the amount of capital helps determine to some degree wages. As employers will always try and hire enough people to fill their factories. If there are relatively few workers available, they'll have to compete for workers. And despite nonsense about what consumption drives production, blah, 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 no, there's enough profit margin that while there may be some cuts to production, and often like even a 6% cut to production can be catastrophic for unemployment rates in the economy, but that's a relatively small amount of the total. And there may be shifts from producing one type of good to another. A factory may shut down and reopen, producing another good that's more targeted at, say, the needs of the rich after an economic slump and restructuring of the economy. The fact is the demand for labor is not directly proportional, or not directly. It's not completely. The R value is such that it's not 100% correlated. It's not the only. Sorry, I'm trying to search for the words. My long COVID brain is. Let me put this in the simplest terms, because I know what I'm trying to say, but my brain is struggling to find words that I should know because I'm a highly educated person, but long COVID affects memory. the number of people, the number of consumers is not the only thing that determines the amount of jobs. It has some influence, but there's always room to, for instance, if demand goes down, to just lower prices to keep consumption up. That is, production. There's still the same number of factories. There's fewer consumers because the population shrinks. If there's enough profit margin, then the owners of those factories can just lower their prices, and will. So the demand for jobs won't necessarily decrease that much. The demand for workers, sorry, won't decrease that much. The amount of jobs. The main reason immigration can help economic growth is what's known as complementarity, where the immigrants, it's not, I should say the main reason immigrants can help average wages is complementarity. It's not that larger populations necessarily lead to higher average wages, though there are some economies of scale with some things. It's more that they have skills that the people in their country don't have. I mean, the people of the country, while they're moving to, it's now their country in a way, too. They have skills that the places they're moving to that people there don't have, or they're wanting to do jobs those people aren't, and that is what can grow an economy. But it's not the simple fact of population increasing. When it comes to willingness to do jobs, there's always something to be said for simply rewriting cultural norms and getting people in a country to be willing to do those jobs themselves. Working conditions not great. You don't want to clean toilets. Well, pay people to clean toilets more money and have them work shorter hours with safer working conditions that, better protective equipment and stuff. People don't want to do farm work. Same kind of thing. Give them more breaks. Give them better pay. It may require sometimes drastic restructuring of how much different professions get paid, but it's perfectly doable. And the reason it's worth doing all these things is because the planet is collapsing. And if there's more people to, say, work in the coal mines, more coal will be extracted and eventually burned. Because if it's produced, it will be sold somewhere, even if the prices have to be slashed, if demand goes down. Which is to say that the size of the global population does have some impact on the amount of CO2 produced. Acting like the two things aren't related is pure nonsense from a strain of leftists who wants to take all the focus away from that because of eco-fascists, because there are right-wingers who are trying to claim that overpopulation is the only problem and do it in a racist way. In fact, the eco-fascists, even if you want to accept their premise that overpopulation is the problem, have precisely the wrong idea. The people who have the greatest impact on climate change on the planet are the people in the rich countries, the white people. So if there's people who should have fewer kids, it's not brown people. It's rich white assholes. They're the ones who should have fewer kids. When you look at carbon footprints, of course, there's questions of if the developed world consumed less, would just more resources be consumed in the developing world? And is it actually even possible to decrease the population in rich countries? And of course, there's a certain racist narrative even in that, because there are brown people in rich countries that have been traditionally white, whose their ancestors moved the country 2 generations ago. They're just as much Americans or British or French or whatever it is, people whose ancestors have been there 12 generations. They were born there, that's all they've ever known, that's their country too. So there's a lot of bullshit rhetoric from the far right, of course, and from some of the left. The population does need to decrease. More people necessarily are going to consume more food. And society is going to, for instance, redesign itself to make sure they can feed all those people. More people are probably going to consume more housing. There's some ability to crowd people in tighter, so that's less for certain. The more food is for absolute certain, unless people are going to starve to death. And minus the small effect of people becoming less obese, which obese people consume more calories. More people will consume more food. They'll generally consume more housing. they'll generally consume more fuel for transportation, even though people who use, say, mass transit use less fuel per capita, less per person. Two people riding trains will still consume more fuel than one because the trains might need to run more frequently, or they need to be longer trains, or which have more powerful locomotives, or so forth. You can increase efficiency, but no matter what you do, more people are going to consume more resources relative to a smaller number of people consuming resources at the same efficiency level. It's comparing apples and oranges when you start talking about, well, if we increase efficiency, we can feed and clothe and transport everyone. That's true. That's true. Which is why aggressively focusing on population is stupid, because there is much lower hanging fruit in terms of building mass transit, increasing the eco efficiency of housing, of industry, these kind of things. There's absolutely other better ways, but we shouldn't be encouraging population growth, is what I'm saying. If it's going to shrink, and the population is shrinking because people are having fewer kids, we shouldn't be railing against it and saying it's a disaster and doing almost fascist-like shit of trying to encourage or force people to have more kids. No. Nor should people be saying that's the reason to let in immigrants. It's not. To offset shrinking population. The reason to let in immigrants is because these are human beings who are trying to search out better opportunities, and their needs are just as valid as the people already live in the country. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. The reason is not, oh, so our populations won't decrease, so we'll be able to avoid reforming our pension systems to not rely on having a very small number of old people, because the population is growing regardless. We have to fix those systems, and it's not going to work to just raise retirement ages, which is stirring a lot of anger for good reason. We shouldn't be doing that. Instead, we need to change how we raise money. In the US, for instance, we need to eliminate the Social Security contribution cap as a first step. You pay a percentage of your paycheck Social Security taxes, which note paycheck, so rich people pay themselves in stocks and bonds, get around this and don't pay their fair share, even if out the contribution cap. But then on top of that, after a certain amount of money they make a year, they don't pay anything more into Social Security payroll tax, no matter how much money they make. That's unjust. That's wrong. That's not even a flat tax rate. That is a regressive tax rate where the poor pay a higher rate than the rich. That is unacceptable, and that needs to change, and that will help bail out Social Security in the US if we do it. Other countries often have similar systems. They may not have contribution caps, but there's still a effect of the rich paying themselves in stocks and bonds and in-kind benefits to avoid paying more into that tax. There's tax avoidance, there's Cayman Islands accounts, all sorts of stuff. You got to change how you fund pensions if pensions are going to be in trouble if you don't have the population grow. Take more immigrants, have the population grow. Because you shouldn't be in a situation where you'll have no choice but to do a certain thing, and the population does need to shrink. The population of the third world is going to start shrinking eventually too, so you can't rely on immigration forever. Sooner or later, you're going to have to fix pension systems. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And of course, right now, the people who hold all the power, the very rich, would try and, quote, fix systems in ways that only make them more privileged. But that's a entirely different matter. Nothing in society is going to get better if we don't break the power of the rich, break the two-party system in the United States, and money and politics all around the world, and inevitably move to socialism. That's just, things are going to get worse. But when that gets intertwined with trying to claim that population shouldn't be encouraged to decrease, that there shouldn't. It's perfectly reasonable for governments to, for instance, put out ad campaigns encouraging people to have fewer kids. That's a reasonable thing. It's not reasonable when they start doing vile stuff like forced sterilization, which has unfortunately been a thing that India did to its population a lot. Mine's in India because of the scammer, I'm pretty sure, who's from India on a dating app. Get a lot of scammers from India on these apps in the Philippines. But yeah, India for a time did massive forced sterilizations. That's not okay. That's not an acceptable way to decrease population growth. There are good ways and bad ways to approach these things. Making condoms more available and cheaper, that's a good way to decrease population growth. At the same time, people have argued that if there's too much focus on this, you won't help people who are infertile, want to have kids, have families, and there's truth to that, but maybe this isn't a problem. On the other hand, we should be helping as much because although it's difficult for people who want to have kids and can't, arguably, as few people should be having children as possible anywhere on Earth. The population needs to shrink, and a lot, because we have, as a species, proven that we are not willing enough to do the things that need to be done to fix exploding climate. Exploding population, and then even leveling out population now these days, to fix the climate crisis, to reduce our CO2 emissions, to reduce our land usage, and restore more environment to natural land use where, animals can run wild and have habitat. We as a species have proven we're not willing to go far enough with these things. I would argue that's because capitalism and eco-socialism could overcome a lot of these much better, but it doesn't seem people are willing to rise up and institute eco-socialism, to strike, protest, revolt, whatever is necessary. So I'm not going to sit there and side with these idiots who sit there and say population is not a problem. It is a problem. It's just not the biggest problem, not the problem that we should spend all our time on. But it is a contributing factor to climate change. The biggest factor, though, I must emphasize, is the fossil fuel companies, the coal, oil, and natural gas production. And these companies do actually fund efforts to refocus the discussion on carbon footprints and population size. They want to emphasize all the other causes of climate change so that people won't focus on them. And they're probably 90% of the problem, but that doesn't mean we should ignore the other 10% of the problem. So, that was on my mind. I'll probably do a politics video on that soon. I'm trying to just organize my thoughts on this, and I don't know, maybe see how people react in the comments to this, if people do react, because YouTube does not show my videos to many people. It's not showing my videos to many people at all. And it really killed my views when I went to visit a sick family member. Well, a couple sick family members, elderly individuals are close to death just because they're getting old. And when I came back, I found my actually, I think I even checked out his other, but no, I came back because I didn't notice it for a while. I realized my YouTube impressions had went off a cliff while I was gone. Even though I was still publishing stuff, it's like the algorithm somehow knew. Maybe it saw me log on from a different state and assumed somehow it was some kind of bot or something, because I don't know why it did it. There's also an issue with my account temporarily being shut down because of being over an email storage limit and having to fix that. But yeah, I am still trying to get back to where I even was in impressions. I used to get like 14,000 impressions a day, and now it's like 1,000. It's bad. And I need way more. Way more impressions to get to a point where anyone ever sees what I'm saying here, because most people who even click on a video watch for like a minute and then leave. That's just the reality of YouTube and short attention spans, and people saying they don't like what they were watching. And YouTube seemingly not doing a good job of putting out impressions for left-wing content. Right-wingers always seemingly get tons of impressions and very high click-through rates and longer watch times. And I suspect there's something on with YouTube's algorithm, and they're intentionally privileging their content, but it's impossible to ever prove. And if a whistleblower ever came out, they'd probably be killed by YouTube, just like so many whistleblowers have in our modern era, and then they would have their story just suppressed, or they make excuses, just like the Boeing whistleblowers who ended up dead, or the government whistleblowers who end up in jail forever. We live in an age where if something vile is going on, someone comes forward to talk about it, instead of being rewarded for being brave and protected, we fucking crush those people under the boot of power. Shows what kind of society we have here in the West under capitalism. In the US specifically, I'm thinking, but it's true to a large degree throughout the entire West. Anyways, that's enough of this. I'm in a irritated mood today, obviously. This is probably rubbing some of you on the way, so I apologize for that, for my general mood today. Take care of each other, viewers. Be kind to yourselves, and may you always find guiding star to lead you home. Till next time, this is Northstar. Adieu.